The emergency department at St. Andrew's Medical Center never truly slept, but at 2:17 a.m., it operated in a state that felt suspended between fatigue and impact. The fluorescent lights were too bright for the hour. Cardiac monitors pulsed in uneven rhythm. A trauma patient from a highway collision had just been moved upstairs, leaving streaks of diluted blood on the polished floor that environmental services had not yet reached. Nurses moved with mechanical focus, their voices low, clipped, efficient. The night had already been long. At the far end of the station, the newest nurse on the roster stood with a supply clipboard in hand, listening more than speaking. His name badge still looked new. The charge nurse had assigned him restocking and intake observation for the shift. "You'll shadow tonight," she had said earlier, not unkindly but without confidence. He had nodded once. No argument, no attempt to prove anything. He moved through the unit quietly, refilling saline carts, replacing IV start kits, checking oxygen levels in portable tanks. He noticed things others did not bother to track. How one crash cart drawer stuck slightly when opened too quickly. How the overhead security camera near the ambulance bay had a 3-second delay in its rotation. How the automatic doors hesitated before sealing fully. These were not complaints, just observations filed away without expression. Across the department, Officer Daniels, the overnight armed security guard, stood near the ambulance entrance. He had worked at the hospital for years. Broad shoulders, standard issue sidearm secured at his hip. He was known for being steady, predictable. But tonight his posture was different. He paced instead of standing. His hand hovered near his holster more often than necessary. Twice he stepped outside into the ambulance corridor without being called. The rookie nurse noticed the pattern before anyone else did. He did not stare. He did not confront. He adjusted the angle of a supply cart so that the hallway beyond the nurse's station remained visible in his peripheral vision. A paramedic crew wheeled in a patient complaining of chest pain. Controlled chaos resumed. The rookie nurse assisted with leads and oxygen placement under the direction of a senior RN. His hands were steady, his movements economical. He anticipated the next request before it was spoken. "You've done this before?" the senior RN asked quietly. "Clinical rotations," he replied. Nothing more. On the far wall, Daniel spoke urgently into his radio. No one could hear the response. His voice carried tension. The rookie nurse tracked the distance from Daniels to the triage desk. 22 feet, 2 patients in wheelchairs between them. A medication cart creating partial obstruction. The automatic doors opened again. No incoming stretcher this time. Just empty hallway beyond. Daniel stepped inside abruptly, scanning the room as if searching for someone who was not there. A resident glanced up, annoyed. "Everything okay?" she asked. Daniels did not answer. The rookie nurse set down the oxygen tank he had just secured. His gaze lifted, not alarmed, just attentive. He watched Daniels' breathing. Rapid. He watched the guard's shoulders. Elevated. He watched his right hand. Tremor. This was not routine vigilance. This was escalation. "Probably nothing," one of the techs muttered, returning to charting. The rookie nurse moved toward the central desk, not rushing, not drawing attention. He adjusted a stack of patient wristbands that did not need adjusting. From this position, he could see the ambulance bay entrance clearly. He could also see the faces of every staff member within reach. He cataloged who would freeze under pressure, who would run, who would attempt to argue. Daniel stepped back outside again. The automatic doors struggled briefly before closing behind him. The rookie nurse noted the delay. 3 seconds. Enough time for forced entry. He exhaled once, slow and measured. His posture shifted almost imperceptibly. Weight balanced evenly, hands free, eyes steady. A nurse beside him sighed. "Night shift always gets strange," she said. He offered a small nod. No opinion, no reassurance. But his attention never left the door. The overhead lights flickered once as an ambulance powered down outside. The rookie nurse glanced upward at the sound of the engine cut. Silence pressed into the corridor. Daniel's silhouette moved past the frosted glass, then stopped. For a moment, nothing happened. Conversations resumed in fragments. A monitor alarmed and was silenced. Paperwork rustled. But the rookie nurse did not return to his restocking. His body remained aligned with the entrance. His breathing slowed further, not from fear, but from preparation. He had seen posture like that before. He had seen men grip weapons not from authority, but from panic. He had seen how quickly confusion turned to casualties when no one stepped forward at the right second. The automatic doors burst open with violent force. Officer Daniels stepped inside, weapon drawn, eyes wide, scanning wildly across patients and staff. Someone screamed. A tray of instruments clattered to the floor. The rookie nurse did not move backward. He stepped forward one controlled pace, placing himself between the guard and the nearest cluster of patients. His voice, when it came, was calm and level. "Officer, talk to me." And the room tilted towards something none of them were prepared to handle. Officer Daniels' weapon trembled in his grip, the muzzle drifting from one terrified face to another. His breathing was ragged, almost animal. "They're inside," he said, though it sounded less like a warning and more like a conviction. No one understood who he meant. A patient began crying. A resident slowly raised her hands. The rookie nurse did not mirror the panic around him. He studied the guard's stance. Feet too close together, elbows locked, tunnel vision setting in. The problem was not aggression, it was overload. Daniels was not hunting, he was reacting. "Officer," the nurse repeated, one step closer, palms visible at chest level. His tone did not challenge, it anchored. "You're safe. Lower the weapon." Daniels' eyes flicked toward him. Recognition struggled against fear. "They followed the ambulance," he insisted. "Two of them. I saw—" His sentence fractured. The nurse shifted slightly to his left, adjusting the angle so the guard's line of sight narrowed away from the waiting area. He was careful not to rush. Distance closed to 12 feet. "Who followed?" he asked quietly. The question forced Daniels to think instead of react. The muzzle dipped a fraction. Behind the nurse, someone whispered to call 911. Another staff member began inching toward the hallway. The nurse sensed the movement without turning. "Everyone stay still," he said, calm but firm. It was the first time his voice carried authority. It was not loud. It was precise. Daniel's grip tightened again as peripheral motion pulled at his focus. The nurse saw the moment returning. The spiral. He moved. Not fast. Not dramatic. One smooth diagonal step that placed his body just outside the weapon's direct line while his right hand rose slightly higher, drawing Daniels' attention upward. "Look at me," he said. Daniels did. In that thin space of eye contact, the nurse read what others missed. Adrenaline spike, fragmented perception, no clear target. This was not a man intent on firing. This was a man seconds away from losing control of his trigger finger. The nurse closed the final distance in 2 controlled strides. His left hand clamped the guard's wrist with surgical accuracy, thumb pressing against the radial nerve. Simultaneously, his right forearm drove upward under Daniel's elbow, breaking the locked extension. The motion was compact, almost invisible to anyone not watching closely. The gun discharged no round. The weapon struck the floor as the nurse pivoted behind the guard's shoulder, applying downward leverage that redirected Daniel's momentum harmlessly into the supply counter. Gasps filled the ER. The entire exchange lasted less than 3 seconds. Daniels attempted to resist, but the nurse shifted his weight and applied a carotid restraint with exact pressure, enough to disrupt consciousness, not enough to injure. "It's over," he murmured, not to the room, but to the man in his hold. Daniel's body slackened. The nurse guided him down carefully, preventing his head from striking the tile. Silence swallowed the department. The only sound was the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant roll of an unattended stretcher wheel. The rookie nurse released pressure immediately once Daniels lost consciousness, checking his pulse out of instinct. Strong, stable. He slid the weapon farther away with his foot and nudged it behind the medication cart. "He needs oxygen and monitoring," he said evenly, as though discussing routine triage. The charge nurse stared at him, frozen between shock and comprehension. "Call administration," he added, "and secure the ambulance bay. Lockdown protocol." The instructions came without hesitation. A resident moved at once, obeying, before realizing she had done so. 2 techs approached cautiously to help reposition Daniels onto a gurney. The nurse stepped back, hands steady, breathing controlled. There was no triumph in his expression, no visible adrenaline. He retrieved the fallen weapon using a sterile towel and cleared the chamber with practiced familiarity before setting it safely aside. That detail did not go unnoticed. Footsteps pounded in the hallway as additional security personnel arrived, weapons drawn, eyes wide at the sight of their colleague unconscious on the floor. "Stand down," the rookie nurse said quietly, raising one hand in a non-threatening gesture. He experienced acute stress response. No shots fired. His language was clinical, controlled. One of the incoming guards stared at him. "Who are you?" he asked. The nurse did not answer directly. Instead, he stepped aside so they could see Daniels breathing steadily on the gurney. "He thought someone followed the ambulance," he said. "Check exterior cameras before assuming anything." The suggestion hung in the air. It was not defensive. It was procedural. Outside, sirens approached, local police responding to the panic call already placed. Inside the ER, staff slowly lowered their hands. A patient began sobbing again, this time from delayed shock. The nurse turned toward her first, not toward the arriving officers. He crouched beside her wheelchair. "You're safe," he said simply. His tone carried weight now. Not because he demanded it, but because they had seen what he could do. Across the room, the charge nurse finally found her voice. "You said you were just out of clinical rotations." He met her eyes briefly. "Yes, ma'am." It was not a lie. It was not the full truth. Blue and red lights flickered through the ambulance bay glass as police vehicles screeched to a halt. The crisis, however, was not finished. Daniel's words lingered. They followed the ambulance. Two of them. The rookie nurse's gaze drifted toward the dark corridor beyond the doors. His posture did not relax. He had neutralized the immediate danger, but something told him the guard's fear had not come from nowhere, and if Daniels had seen something real, then the hospital was not yet secure. Police officers flooded the ambulance bay within seconds, weapons raised, voices sharp, overlapping. The ER, already shaken, tightened again under the weight of uniforms and flashing lights. Officer Daniels was transferred onto a monitored stretcher, oxygen masks secured, wrists loosely restrained for safety. He regained consciousness briefly, disoriented, repeating the same fragmented warning. They came in behind it. Dark SUV. No plates. His pulse spiked on the monitor. The rookie nurse stood near the foot of the bed, not intruding, simply listening. He noted the consistency in Daniel's phrasing. Not paranoia, pattern recall. Outside, one of the responding officers reported over the radio that a vehicle matching the description had been seen idling 2 blocks away before lights approached. It had turned off its headlights and disappeared. The information moved through the room like a second wave. The guard's fear had context now. The charge nurse looked toward hospital administration, who had arrived breathless and confused, asking procedural questions that no one had time to answer. The rookie nurse stepped closer to the central desk. "Lock the ambulance bay fully," he said quietly. "Redirect incoming traffic to the east entrance. Keep waiting room lights dimmed." The charge nurse hesitated only a moment before relaying the instructions as her own. No one challenged the decision. It made sense. A senior police sergeant approached, scanning the room with controlled urgency. "Who disarmed him?" he asked. Silence stretched briefly before someone pointed toward the rookie nurse. The sergeant studied him. Plain scrubs, no rank, no visible authority. "You security?" he asked. "Nurse," he replied. "Nothing more." The sergeant's gaze sharpened, assessing posture, breathing, stance. "You cleared the weapon properly," he said. It was not a question. The nurse met his eyes evenly. "Yes." A beat passed. Mutual recognition without explanation. The sergeant turned to his officers. "Perimeter sweep. Quiet. No sirens." The tactical shift began there. Not loud, not dramatic, but deliberate. The hospital lights were adjusted subtly. Exterior doors were checked and sealed. The rookie nurse moved through the ER under the appearance of routine patient care, but his path traced sight lines, entrance corridors, blind corners, reflective surfaces. He paused briefly at the security monitor station. The camera feed from the ambulance bay showed a brief flicker 30 minutes earlier, a dark SUV pulling too close behind an arriving ambulance before reversing out of frame. The timestamp aligned with Daniel's first exit outside. The nurse memorized the angle of approach and the seconds of delay between vehicle retreat and door closure. He did not announce his findings. Instead, he approached the sergeant again. "If they intended entry, they tested response time," he said quietly. "They will not rush now." The sergeant watched him carefully. "You speak like you've seen that before." The nurse's expression did not change. "I've seen hesitation used as pressure." It was an answer without admission. Outside, patrol units established a wider perimeter. Inside, staff attempted to resume normal function, though tension clung to every movement. A mother in the waiting area asked if she should leave with her child. The rookie nurse knelt to eye level. "Leaving now would create exposure," he said calmly. "Staying here is safer." His tone carried assurance without force. She stayed. Overhead, a helicopter passed in the distance, unrelated but amplifying nerves. Daniels stabilized further, sedation administered lightly to prevent renewed agitation. Before drifting fully under, he gripped the nurse's sleeve. "They were watching," he whispered. "Not random." The nurse held his gaze. "I know." It was the first time he allowed certainty into his voice. Minutes stretched, no shots fired, no doors breached, yet the threat felt closer than before. The absence of visible attack suggested reconnaissance, patience, calculation. The nurse stood near the ambulance entrance again, hands clasped loosely behind his back, appearing like any other staff member monitoring the corridor. In reality, he was measuring shadows, timing reflections on the glass, tracking subtle shifts in exterior lighting. The sergeant joined him quietly. "We've got units canvassing the blocks," he said. "Nothing yet." The nurse nodded. "They wanted reaction," he replied. "Now they're watching response." The sergeant studied him again. "You military?" The question hung between them. The nurse's eyes remained on the darkened exterior. "Not tonight," he said. It was neither denial nor confirmation. A call came through on the sergeant's radio. An officer had located the SUV abandoned 3 streets away, engine still warm. No occupants. Inside the ER, tension sharpened rather than eased. Abandonment meant mobility on foot, closer. The nurse's posture shifted subtly, weight balanced, attention narrowing. "Increase interior patrols," he suggested quietly. "Not visible, just movement." The sergeant relayed the order without hesitation. Authority had shifted fully now, though no one had declared it. Staff followed instructions passed down through official channels, unaware of their origin. The rookie nurse returned briefly to a patient needing IV adjustment, hands steady as ever, quiet competence in the middle of uncertainty. No one watching him would guess that he was mapping possible entry points in his mind while flushing a saline line. Outside, somewhere beyond the sealed glass, the unseen observers had not left. The crisis had changed shape, not explosive, but strategic. And the rookie nurse understood that if confrontation came, it would not be loud at first. It would be precise. He exhaled slowly, centering himself. The night was not over. The call came from the East Corridor just after 3:08 a.m. A maintenance worker reporting a forced utility door near the loading dock. No alarm had triggered, no shattered glass, just a door that should have been sealed, now resting slightly ajar. The perimeter units were still canvassing the outer streets. Whoever had abandoned the SUV had not retreated far. The sergeant's jaw tightened as he received the update. "We move slow," he ordered into the radio. "No noise." The rookie nurse was already walking toward the east wing before anyone asked him to. He did not run. Running spreads fear. He passed 2 interns whispering in the hallway and told them calmly to remain inside patient rooms and secure the doors. His voice carried no panic, only direction. At the end of the corridor, dim lights hummed above the service entrance. The door stood open by less than an inch. Cool night air slipped through the gap. The sergeant arrived beside him with 2 officers. "Stay back," one officer said automatically, seeing only scrubs. The nurse did not argue. He stepped half a pace behind, but his eyes never left the hinge. The scratch marks along the metal were fresh. Controlled entry, not forced by impulse. The sergeant motioned for one officer to cover while he nudged the door wider with his boot. The loading dock beyond was quiet. Pallets stacked, shadows long and uneven. For a moment, nothing moved. Then a faint metallic sound echoed from deeper inside, soft, deliberate, like a shoe brushing a loose bolt. The officers stiffened, weapons raised. The rookie nurse's gaze shifted upward to the overhead pipes and then to the blind corner near the generator housing. "Left side elevation," he said quietly. The sergeant's eyes followed instinctively. A figure shifted in the shadows above the dock platform. Someone crouched along the maintenance scaffolding, attempting to remain unseen. Not random, not desperate. Positioned for observation or entry into the interior corridor. "Police!" one officer shouted. "Show your hands." The figure moved suddenly, not toward surrender, but toward escape, dropping from the scaffolding to the concrete floor and sprinting toward the interior access hall that led back toward patient areas. The officers gave chase. The rookie nurse followed without thinking, then caught himself. He was not supposed to be here, not in this role, but the hallway ahead led directly toward occupied rooms. If the intruder reached the main ER corridor, panic would ignite again. The nurse calculated distance, speed, layout. He knew the floor plan better than the officers who had just arrived. He cut through a side supply passage, intercepting the path before the intruder reached the central junction. The man rounded the corner fast and collided directly into him. For a split second, they locked eyes, surprise meeting composure. The intruder attempted to shove past. The nurse pivoted, redirecting the momentum instead of blocking it, guiding the man's shoulder into the wall with controlled force. The impact stunned, but did not incapacitate. The intruder swung an elbow backward. The nurse absorbed the strike along his forearm, pain sharp but manageable. He responded not with aggression, but with efficiency, hooking the man's wrist, rotating it outward, destabilizing balance, then driving him downward to the tile in a clean, contained takedown. No punches. No excessive force. The officers arrived seconds later, weapons trained. "Do not shoot," the nurse said evenly, already controlling the suspect's arm against the floor. The intruder reached toward his waistband. The nurse tightened pressure at the joint, immobilizing the hand before it could grasp anything. A folding knife clattered harmlessly away as officers secured him in cuffs. Breathing filled the narrow hallway. No gunfire, no casualties. The nurse stepped back immediately once control transferred, lowering his hands. Blood from a shallow cut along his sleeve began to soak through the fabric where the elbow had struck him against the edge of a supply cart during the struggle. He ignored it. The sergeant stared at him openly now. "You cleared that corner before we saw him," he said quietly. The nurse did not respond. He looked instead toward the loading dock entrance. "There was another," he said. "The guard said too." As if summoned by the statement, a radio crackled. Another officer reporting movement near the west stairwell. The second suspect had attempted entry through an internal door, but retreated upon hearing pursuit. Within minutes, he too was apprehended outside the building perimeter. The coordinated test was over. The threat contained. Back in the ER, staff remained unaware of how close the intrusion had come. The charge nurse noticed the blood on his sleeve immediately. "You're injured," she said, reaching for gauze. "It's superficial," he replied calmly. He allowed her to clean the cut without resistance. His expression did not change as antiseptic stung the wound. The cost was small compared to what had been prevented. Hospital administration arrived again, shaken but relieved, already discussing statements and liability. The sergeant approached the rookie nurse one last time. "You intervened before my officers had line of sight," he said. "That could have gone differently." The nurse met his gaze. Yes. There was no defensiveness, only acknowledgement. He had stepped into exposure. He had chosen involvement over concealment. That choice carried consequence. Internal review will ask questions. The sergeant added, "About you." The nurse gave a slight nod. Understood. He had crossed the line between anonymity and notice, not publicly, but officially. The ER lights returned to normal brightness. The east corridor was resealed. Patients remained safe, unaware that violence had nearly reached their doors. The rookie nurse returned to his assignment, checking IV lines, adjusting monitors, documenting vitals. His movements were steady despite the ache forming along his arm. The crisis had not demanded lethal force. He had ensured it did not. That restraint had been the true decision, and it had come at the cost of remaining invisible. By 4:12 a.m., the emergency department had resumed its rhythm, though it felt thinner, as if the air itself had been strained and poured back carefully into place. Police vehicles remained outside, but without lights now. The loading dock was sealed, the east corridor scrubbed of any sign that someone had been forced to the ground there. The two suspects were in custody. Administration had already begun drafting language. Attempted trespass, swift law enforcement response. No injuries reported. The version that would travel upward through official channels would be clean and contained. Officer Daniels rested under observation in a quiet room, sedated lightly, his sidearm secured in a locked evidence case pending review. The rookie nurse stood at the foot of Daniels' bed, checking his vitals with the same calm precision he had shown hours earlier. No one in the room spoke about what had happened in the ambulance bay. Daniels opened his eyes briefly, clarity returning in fragments. He looked at the nurse with recognition that was steadier now. "I wasn't wrong," he murmured. "No," the nurse replied. That was all. Across the hall, the charge nurse finalized incident documentation. Her pen paused more than once. She glanced toward the rookie nurse as he passed the station, sleeve freshly changed, wound dressed beneath clean fabric. The way she looked at him had shifted. Not admiration, not fear, but recalibration. "You could have been hurt," she said quietly. "Yes," he answered. No justification followed, no explanation of training. She studied him for a moment longer. "Your file said prior field experience," she added carefully. He met her eyes evenly. "It does." She let the conversation end there. At 5 a.m., the police sergeant returned once more before clearing his units. He approached without uniform stiffness this time. "Internal Affairs will review the footage," he said. "They will notice you." The nurse nodded once. "I assumed they would." The sergeant held his gaze. "You prevented gunfire. Twice." It was not praise. It was record. The nurse's response was steady. That was the objective. A pause lingered between them, mutual understanding of roles that did not need naming. The sergeant extended his hand. The nurse shook it briefly. No exchange of ranks, no titles, just acknowledgement. When the patrol cars finally rolled away, the hospital parking lot returned to its ordinary stillness. Dawn began pressing pale light against the eastern windows. Inside the ER, a new shift filtered in, unaware of how close the night had come to rupture. Report handoffs were concise. Security incident handled. 2 in custody. No patient impact. The rookie nurse completed his charting last. His notes were precise, factual, unemotional. He documented Daniel's vitals, the oxygen adjustments, the timeline of sedation. He did not document his own involvement beyond what protocol required. There was no embellishment. When he removed his badge at the locker room bench, his hands paused briefly over the faint bruise forming along his forearm. The ache would deepen later. He accepted it without expression. A hospital administrator stepped into the locker room doorway just before he left. "We may need a statement from you," she said. "Of course," he replied. She hesitated. "You handled yourself unusually well." He waited, offering nothing further. After a moment, she nodded to herself and left. Outside, early morning light washed the building in soft gray. The rookie nurse exited through the employee entrance, not the main doors. No one stopped him. No one applauded. The story forming inside the hospital would travel in fragments. How the new nurse stayed calm, how he disarmed a guard without anyone getting shot, how he somehow knew where to stand before the second suspect turned the corner. But stories inside hospitals fade quickly beneath the next emergency. As he walked toward the quiet street, a black government sedan idled briefly across from the parking lot. Tinted windows, engine low. It did not approach. It did not signal. After a few seconds, it drove away. The nurse did not turn his head to follow it. He adjusted his jacket over his scrubs and continued walking. The hospital behind him looked ordinary again. By noon, it would be as if nothing had happened. Patients would fill the waiting room. Nurses would argue about schedules. Officer Daniels would begin administrative leave and mandatory evaluation. Reports would be filed. Questions would be asked quietly in offices with closed doors. The rookie nurse would return for his next shift as scheduled. Same badge, same assignment, no announcement. Inside the ER, one of the interns who had frozen during the initial charge would later say, "He didn't even look scared." Another would reply, "He never does." But by then, he would already be back at the supply cart, restocking saline, observing exits, standing where he always stood, close enough to step forward, far enough to remain unseen. The night had tested the hospital. It had tested him. He had chosen restraint over force, containment over recognition. And when morning fully arrived, there was no spotlight waiting. Only another shift, another corridor, another quiet assignment.